Nearly a year in the remaking, the new Dutch gallery has opened at the Museum of Fine Arts, along with two new spaces that deliver us to the United Kingdom. And who better to show Jared Bowen around than the MFA's British-born director, Malcolm Rogers.
So what's the scope of the art here we have from the Netherlands from the 17th century?
Predominantly Dutch, but also Flemish. Some of the greatest painters of all time. For instance, in this gallery alone, there are 7 Rembrandts. Can you believe it? I don't know that we've ever done that at the MFA.
The newly renovated Dutch and Flemish gallery at the Museum of Fine Arts brims with all of the Dutch favorites. About 30 paintings of landscapes, still lifes, and portraits by the Dutch masters. In a shift of museum philosophy, there are lots of decorative objects shown as well.
I love to see the juxtaposition because they were all produced in the same countries at about the same time. It tells you something about society and the culture of the time.
So what made it the golden age? What was the climate that produced this really magnificent art?
Great prosperity, very stable values. I'm sure a certain amount of ostentation and superb craftsmanship on the part of some remarkable artists.
Including the renowned Rembrandt, whose portrait of Alcha, on loan from the local Van Otterloo family, is one of the greatest Rembrandts in private hands, according to Rogers. What makes her a treasure?
It's one of the most sensitive portraits of old age ever painted by Rembrandt in 1632, someone he knew quite well. And what is so obvious about the picture is the refinement, the delicacy of the painting.
Adjacent to the new Dutch gallery, the museum has also installed 2 period rooms that take us first from the Netherlands to the English countryside. Tell me about Newland House.
Well, period rooms, transport you back in time and to other places. And here we are in a room that dates from about the later 1740s, and we're in the Cotswolds in Oxfordshire, one of the most beautiful country areas in England. It wasn't a palace, it was a modest country house. This is the way wealthy gentry lived in the mid-18th century.
The room is accented with the museum's own period paintings and furnishings, as is the case next door as we venture north. So this is decidedly less modest. Hamilton Palace in Scotland?
Yes, one of the grandest, if not the grandest, palaces in Scotland. Dates from the late 17th century and again takes us back in time in a wonderful way. Rich, sombre, heavily carved panelling, and we've used it here as a backdrop for one of the greatest collections of British silver in America.
And tell me about the collection, the silver collection that you have here.
As you can see, the pieces are very beautiful, very sculptural, very ornate, and at their time would have been considered wonderful demonstrations of wealth and a wonderful way of reflecting candlelight on the dinner table.
And what is it like for you, who obviously knows this museum so well, to walk through these spaces and see art that you know so well in these renovated spaces?
I feel very, very proud. It's very exciting, because what a museum is for is to move art into the public domain for everyone to enjoy.
And Jared Bowen is here. You know, it surprises me that this wasn't done decades ago, that you make the art in the period and you have all the other artifacts around instead of just the paintings on the wall.
Yeah, it's somewhat controversial among the museum set, because some people feel that you should have these paintings even on a stark white background so that all you're looking to are the paintings, all that your eye is drawn to is the paintings. But Malcolm Rogers, who's now the chair of the Art of Europe, has a much different philosophy, just like he redid the Coke Gallery with all those European masterpieces, and he put that the red silk fabric. Here it's a gray silk fabric, introduced the other elements with a pattern, right? So it gives you a sense that you're walking into a more opulent room, and I think it suggests a period of the time. And personally, I don't find myself distracted at all. You're still, especially when you're in Dutch masters, you're still drawn to the skies and the landscape. You're still drawn to, as one curator once described it to me, the sculpting and light that Rembrandt does in his paintings. I don't think it detracts.
So what's the significance of it now?
Well, I think what you're saying is, a sort of a new time for the MFA, and this is a beautiful, beautiful gallery, 31-foot tall ceilings. The Van Otterloo family was instrumental in renovating this gallery, and you're also seeing these 2 period rooms brought back. They both had been on display, but not in the Museum of Fine Arts for a really long time.
Well, they original replicas. I mean, what are they exactly?
They're the walls, the original carvings, and so on and so forth from these estates. I mean,
they are the original original piece?
The original pieces,
Wow.
not the furnishings inside, but the original. And in fact, it's very heartening because in Newland House, the first piece that we saw in Oxfordshire, in the Cotswolds, that building burned down within the last 2 years. So this is the only remaining piece of it, which is just, it's kind of devastating. It was interesting. I asked Malcolm Rogers that, why these pieces came forward. And there was a period at the turn of the century and through the 1920s where it's sort of, the Downton Abbey effect. Suddenly these big families, or these families couldn't fund their big homes anymore, so they were sort of divided up. And in this case, it was great fortune that at least some of it was saved.
Well, you mentioned the Van Otterloos, who are a Marblehead couple who have perhaps the most extensive collection of Dutch and Flemish masters in the world. And the MFA, you interviewed her a few years ago, I believe, in a piece for up in the Peabody Essex Museum. Of course, both museums would love to eventually own their collection. Well, I mean, this is a nice start for the MFA to have a Rembrandt of theirs, but...
Well, this is Mrs. Van Otterloo, who we're looking at now, and this is, talk about conversation in the museum world. This is
I know,
huge
this is hot.
Conversation because all of the museums, of course, want their collection.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been described as the best collection of Dutch art outside of the Netherlands, and so there's a lot of conversation about who's going to get this collection. The Peabody Essex Museum did this big grand show. Obviously, they have a great relationship with the MFA. They're trustees there, but they're elsewhere at the Peabody Essex Museum. But she also recently told the Globe that if the Chicago Art Institute called and if they were interested, they would call them too.
I didn't know you could actually buy a Rembrandt on the market. And well, they've been able to do that.
It's increasingly rare, which is why it's such a great opportunity to see this piece and that portrait here in Boston.
Just unbelievable. Great. All right, Jared Bowen, thanks so much for that. All right, and that is it for Greater Boston. Tomorrow night, the special election for the United States Senate will have full coverage as Ed Markey and Gabriel Gomez make their final pitch. Plus, here's a fishy home improvement project. The New England Aquarium is about to make a splash with the reopening of its giant ocean tank. We meet some of the proud new homeowners. That's all tomorrow. I'm Emily Rooney. Thanks for watching.